that is a key. If you go into any of this literature about organizational learning, is that you need a way to recognize actual failure, because they can improve if you don't do that, and you need to be able to change your behavior, and I think that's the key for a lot of why these DevOps initiatives, transformation initiatives struggle, is they get some new ideas, they get some new vocabulary into an organization, but there's so much calcified process. There's so much calcified power dynamics in the head count and the budgets that it's very difficult for anyone to change their actual behavior. So
abnormal DevOps iterations.
And here we are. So welcome, Andrew, to this new episode of Abnormal DevOps Iterations. First of all, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
And that's
quite the intro you got.
Yeah, it all made my machines. It did almost nothing.
That's how the world.
Yeah, that's how things happen in these days. No, you let machines do your work, and actually, I also asked to the AI to write some questions. So if they are good, it's the AI doing them.
So we can abdicate all responsibility for the
Indeed. First of all, for the few who don't know you are probably one of the thought leaders in the DevOps world. I remember this Agile infrastructures talk way a long time ago. What was that? 2009?
2008 was, I think, the first time that we started using those words.
Wonderful. Are there some concepts in that talk which are still relevant and actual?
I would say all of them. I don't think we made that much progress, honestly.
Well, there was this.
I do think the term thought leader is a little bit of a pejorative sometimes, but I also try to do some work along the way. But definitely did some talks.
Indeed, but still there is this thing. There is in one of the slides you mentioned the clouds are rising. Now I guess the clouds are everywhere. Probably there is some more.
Well, 2008. So you're 2 years into Amazon EC2, and it was obvious to certain people that was going to be a thing, but I don't think it was pervasive at that point.
Yeah. Do you think that the whole world DevOps promise has been fulfilled in some way over the years?
That is a interesting question. So there's lots of things that lots of people think this word means, and I'm not sure if you get multiple people discussing it that they all use the same definition. But I would say that there's been progress. At the same time, I don't think that we've achieved some of the things that we aspired to, if you want to go back in time. And part of what I'm fascinated with recently is, in some ways, I feel like we just keep relearning the same lessons over and over. And in particular, an obvious example, the word Socio-Technical Systems comes from this study at the Tavistock Institute of people mining coal in London. And if you go through those papers, the insights that they have look suspiciously like all of the things that people are talking about DevOps 10, 15 years ago. And you can find more and more examples of that, right? So Deming, Akoff, all these system, thinkers have pointed out these clear advantages to working in a certain way, collaborating in a certain way, having a thoughtful. So the social research is about the joint optimization between the man or the human and the machinery. And I don't think that we are very good at these lessons, and we need to invent new words all the time. So DevOps was kind of this new word, and there was a movement that came together to relearn things that they'd already learned mining coal in the 1950s. And then now we have the same cycle, right? So now, and we watched this with Agile, and we lived it with DevOps, and now there's all these people saying like a new word, but they don't have there's not any new idea. It's just we say the new word then. And I used to think that was not good. Now I realize it's kind of the circle of life in a way. And if you don't have the novel word, then you get even more problems in organizations that have already expended all of the resources and psychic energy on the old word. They need a new word to try to do the thing wrong again.
That's nice. So what are you doing these times? Your working activities, or what they are like?
I have a lot of things that I'm doing. So there's, honestly, my days right now seem like they're dominated by trying to get my kids to get their act together. So that, and then my wife's a doctor, and she has some projects, and we're trying to do some interesting stuff to build her practice. And then I bought a restaurant because that's like, something to do, take more time. That's another whole long rabbit hole if you want to have another podcast. But
I think okay, there is some audio problem for some time. Yeah, now it's better.
It looked like the network dropped.
Yeah.
So we do more or less DevOps consulting, but instead of trying to say, oh, like you have to do these things or these buzzwords mean this to you, we just focus on the work you have to do and then back into what would improve that. So part of it is this journey, right? So I go from working on Puppet and Puppet community stuff into Cloud Foundry and platform stuff. Spent 5 years at Pivotal, then spent 3 years at Red Hat during the pandemic. And at some point, you have spent all this time trying to get people to believe that this tool will be the thing that solves their problems. And you come to realize that maybe it's not the tool, and that there's ways that you could think about that it's not so tool-centric. I think that the one-size-fits-all DevOps conversation probably did more harm than good, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. So if we can summarize it in some way, what is your approach when you go to a company doing some kind of consulting about how to organize or optimize their own workflows?
So there's a lot of prior art, and we try to take advantage of all the other stuff people have done. We've been involved in DDD community, event storming, value stream mapping, that kind of stuff. I think the real focus is trying to recognize the coalitions that you need to build on the socio side of it to get the work to happen. So, in Dev, we mentioned DevOps, and DevOps is the title of this, but in some ways, DevOps is way too limiting for what you need to do in a lot of organizations. And it kind of makes the most sense, and the world that was born from was sort of building big web apps and big web servicey things. But you get into some places and you have manufacturing, and you're trying to integrate all of these things into an actual physical device. And so your platform is a car or a medical device or weapon systems or some other crazy thing. And if you're trying to copy someone's blog post from how they did something on their website, it's not going to work very well.
Okay, yeah, indeed. So this is the AI question. So let me read it because I used a notebook, sent the link of your site, and that asked him write some questions for Andrew. So here it is. Let's full disclaim. So that's interesting. How you can so Ergonautic emphasizes an holistic approach that goes beyond Dev and Ops. How can listeners assess whether their DevOps initiatives are truly aligned with business goals or risk becoming siloed and ineffective? What are your metrics, somehow your alarms, which you maybe have in understanding if the
So there's already kind of these oversimplified metrics frameworks that people are throwing around. So you have DORA and SPACE and DX, and they have value, but I think it's a little oversimplified for a lot of what people have to deal with. In particular, you don't like Dev and Ops is already too simplified. There's not a single dev, right? Like there's a whole bunch of different heterogeneous developers in most organizations. And we could make similar arguments for ops and infrastructure type stuff too. So what we want to get people to think about is from first principles, you need work to happen and you need these people to be aligned with these other people. So kind of the Conway's law or reverse Conway's maneuver, what are the metrics and what is the right cadence, right? Because the other thing that you see in a lot of cases is you have a model and people are trying to drive that model, right? So here's a concrete example where people said, oh, DORA metrics, that seems like a good idea. And then what ends up happening over time is that just gets oversimplified to, we just need to deploy more frequently. And so they're overclocking this metric to deploy more frequently. And maybe they try to measure some of the other stuff, but measuring's hard and they're not really talking to each other anyway. And then now there's this new shiny platform engineering initiative or whatever. Someone else got this observability budget. And so they're just kind of like fractures and splinters in the organization. So the language that we try to get people to think about, and I think all of us have experienced this to certain degrees, depending on where we sit in an organization, is this idea of lamination and integration. So if you have organization that has hierarchies, which almost all of them will, then if you have disconnect between the understanding, and that could be metrics and that could be conversations between the executives, the managers, and the practitioners, then we call that a delamination, right? So it's like the executives have some idea about what our strategy is, and they think that that's been well explained to the managers, and then by the time it gets to the practitioners, they have no idea how they do anything that adds value to the company. And that would be a delamination. And then we also talk about a disintegration. And so this is between capabilities in an organization, right? So like a clear example would be Dev and Ops, that you're not getting the right whatever information to make good decisions about how the outcome. So what you said you tend to have in capabilities is everyone wants to optimize for their life. Everyone wants to optimize for their lifestyle. So they're going to overclock the metrics that make the most sense to them, but it's about getting the right metrics and the right conversations between those groups. So Dev and Ops is an integration, right? So you also maybe have security, you also have maybe like physical stuff, you have a bunch of other, considerations. So integration is trying to figure out what's the right metric and conversation to have. And you could even have integration problems between dev teams, right? Because I think another oversimplification that often comes is people talk about Dev and Ops and they're both these big monoliths, but you actually have fracturing in most organizations between development teams too. So
Indeed.
Just trying to get everyone on the same mission.
I saw an article, a post, provocative as usual when it's you, about what was that? The real reason all your talent is wasted. Can you elaborate on it? And because the title is cool enough to bring some attention.
I mean, in many ways, it's just what we're talking about now. So there's lots of things that people have struggles with, and I gave talk a long time ago. Probably one of the talks I'm the most proud of, and I think that I'll say it's timeless, is that there is a talent shortage. But you still hear constant refrain that, oh, we don't have the right talent or we need more talent. And I mean, in the US, I don't know if you're paying attention to our politics, which hopefully you don't have to, but they've been arguing about all these visas and what we need for talent for tech. And I believe fundamentally on the talent question that all humans have latent potential that could be developed, and any one of us could become much better at anything that we want to do. So there's that. But then it's really this question of delamination and disintegration. So you end up with organizations where if you're the most talented person at one particular skill, but you're not set up in an organization where they're going to recognize that skill, take advantage of that skill, communicate how that is contributing to the business or whatever the mission is, because not everything is a business. Then it's hard for you to be successful, right? And you get into these cycles. I mean, this is like a deep rabbit hole, and hopefully so Ergonomics working on some more blog posts and a book, and there's a bunch of reasons why this will hopefully be more clear when more pieces of the puzzle are put together. But when you think about your own career, or you think about conversation you have with peers, a lot of people feel like they're not able to do all the things that they want to do, right? And it's like, oh, you have a great idea, and you take it to your manager, or you take it to your sponsoring executive, and that idea doesn't turn into anything, then it's like, how many more ideas are you going to share, right? And so I think you just get to this place in a lot of organizations where people are doing the minimum viable, not get fired job, and then when they get a new chance to do something else, they'll like go to the next job. I mean, tech's in a weird state right now because, and you didn't ask me an AI question, but we can go to AI stuff. But it's like, I think a lot of organizations have this or have been sold this idea that AI is going to do all this stuff for them, and I think, I mean, based on what I've seen, there's smoke and fire here, but you got to be very careful about how you try to use AI, and you can trick yourself into thinking that you're productive when you're not very productive, and you can end up with a bunch of, like, this is a very interesting thing, and we've shifted a lot more of our focus onto AI as a socio-technical construct, and what it takes to be productive with AI, which I also got some interesting ideas from some papers, is you need to have a good task decomposition strategy, right? If you just ask an AI to solve all these problems, then the chance that it will solve them is very, very low. And then it's almost worse if it almost solves them, and you kind of get into this slot machine. I think you have these games in Italy, place where you like pull the lever and it just like spins the wheels, and you hope it gets the right thing, but it doesn't get any closer, and it like gets worse actually when you keep trying to pull the lever. So what you can do to get out of that, and I'm sure some listening to this has gone through this cycle, is you don't ask the big thing to be solved. You start to break down the tasks, and you can get a small answer and a small answer, and then you can recompose them. But you also need to have the ability to know what good looks like. So anecdotally, from what I've seen, the more advanced or the more understanding you have as a technical person or a writer, any domain really, then the more you can leverage the AIs, because you can tell when it's wrong, right? Your most dangerous position is when you just believe what the AI is doing is the right thing.
Absolutely. And what is your opinion about this fact that we are going to feed the AIs with more and more synthetic data? And so basically, the knowledge of AIs will be more and more based on AI-generated data.
I mean, I just think that's the descent into madness. I don't see how that improves if you study the actual problem, I don't see how synthetic data expands the repertoire of the answers you can get in a meaningful way. All you're doing is like reinforcing the bias in whatever synthetic stuff you're making. I'm a huge fan of AI, and I love what's happening in a way where, like, I'm using AI every day. There's lots of stuff you can do with code. There's lots of stuff you can do with text. I'm maybe the most excited about and I don't think it's quite where I want it to be yet, but you could do like these video and like music stuff. It's really, really, really inspiring. But if you just say, hey, solve this problem for me, and it's a big problem, like you cannot turn your back on these things and expected results. You have an army of juniors who are very capable and very fast at your disposal, but you have to manage them, or else they're gonna take you in places you don't want to go.
And in terms of infrastructures management, do you think what will be the role of AI? Will we have AI-driven and managed infrastructures in some one day?
I mean, in many respects, you could argue a lot of the stuff we've been doing was AI-driven or machine-driven, but I think LLMs aren't necessarily the right way to solve a bunch of those problems. I don't think this is the question you're asking directly, but I think it is related. What's happening right now is going to drive a lot of infrastructure investment. So you're going to see more data centers. You're going to see, obviously there are going to be a lot of these machine learning specific infrastructures, but that's just more computers, and the configuration management problem is not going to go away. It's going to get bigger every day.
So you mentioned configuration management, and I think about Puppet because we know about because of Puppet. So just the usual question I always ask, because I still do things with Puppet and I always wonder how long I can keep on doing them. Do you think Puppet has a role in the future of infrastructure?
There's a lot of things going on with Puppet, and there's probably some sensitive topics for different reasons for different people. I'm sure you saw the discussion about forking the project. So what I would say is the future of Puppet is somewhat dependent on the path that some of those things take, but I don't see the need for what Puppet does going away, right? So whether that is going to be Puppet specific, and there's other choices and other tools, which I'm sure most of them or all of them, that problem is not solved. So that there's definitely going to be a need for that tool. What the future of that particular tool or community looks like is maybe a little bit unclear at this moment, but I don't see the problem of configuring computers going away anytime soon.
Indeed. Also because, as you said, more and more infrastructure to be managed, more and more systems to be managed, something has to manage them. So
the core idea, honestly, to drag it back to some of the stuff I'm fascinated with in our day-to-day work right now, is the core idea for all these tools, whether you're talking about Kubernetes or Puppet or whatever, is this control loop idea, right? Where you have some desired state, whether, at least if you're in the camp that believes that it's better to have these declarative desired state mechanisms instead of just have an imperative thing that things are told to do. So you can check against the measured ground state, and then you say, okay, what's the transition to get to the desired state? And that's how Puppet works. That's how Kubernetes works. That's how all these tools that we think about in configuration management work. What I am trying to get people to do is think about that same problem with their organization, right? Like, what's the desired state? What's the control loop? What's the model that you are applying this to? And if your model is correct and you do these things, then you'd expect these metrics to look this way. And if they don't look that way, then you're either not doing something you thought you were doing, or your model's incorrect. And trying to give people tools to revisit how they go after their different business objectives. But another thing which may or may not be interesting to you or your audience, but I think is interesting to think about, is the difference between the node-centric resource model that you get with Puppet and that generation of tools, and then the kind of service-centric resource model that becomes possible with some of the cloud and like Kubernetes type stuff, because it's the same loop, but the granularity of the resource model is different.
All right. So back to infrastructures, because I'm still a technical guy. Do you think? Do you know System Initiative, the tool by?
Oh, yeah.
So, what do you think about this new paradigm in some way, which drifts from in some way from infrastructure as code towards something like, as Adam says, infrastructure as model, and where you don't have things that define how your infrastructure is, but code which interacts with your infrastructure and does things based on how the infrastructure changes.
So I think it's the incremental, shift in the paradigm. There's roots in other stuff. I don't know. I mean, you've seen the management config stuff. James does probably. It's got some ideas. I also like some of the other experiments Adam did with, like, Habitat had some interesting ideas, and I'm into like the avant-garde stuff that no one, like the stuff Pivotal did with Bosch was actually pretty interesting, and there's some parallels to some of that stuff. One thing I'm not 100% sold on, and we'll see how this evolves with the stuff Adam's building, is the digital twin stuff and counting on those for various reasons. But I mean, this is the marketplace of ideas, and it's a combination of the technology and then kind of the community. Because I don't believe that technology wins because it's the best technology. So there's a lot of great ideas in System Initiative. There were great ideas in Habitat, right? But it didn't kind of get the life, the community around it. So it'll be kind of a question of how much Adam can like bring a movement around it and like get the right people trying to use it. So I believe it's got some interesting ideas. I believe Adam's always going to have his hands dirty with some infrastructure-y thing, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. We had him here in a pair of episodes ago. He's very bullish about this initiative.
I watched your episode, but I've seen Adam working on that. I mean, he's like 4 or 5 years into it, right? So he's been tweeting about it, and now it's more public. But for a long time, they were working on it.
Yeah, I hope it will succeed, because in some way it's very interesting. We will see.
I mean, I think there's another meta conversation there about what does success mean, right? Like, what's good enough for success for various parties. He's taken investors, and I know some of them too, and there's aspirations to do certain things, and I hope everyone succeeds, honestly. There's a lot of reasons for these things to be better, and you run the experiment and see where it goes.
Indeed. So think about people we were here. We started with Luke. How are your relations with him, and why you left Puppet, by the way? I mean, maybe it's old news, but just asking.
I mean, this is ancient news, right? So this is like 15 years ago. I miss Luke some days, but he's. I think he probably has my number. We didn't see eye to eye on certain things, and there were a lot of contributing factors, but we didn't really want to build the same thing. And how that played out, Luke had every right to run the Puppet strategy that he wanted to build and build the Puppet company he wanted to build, and so that's what happened. And I had. You have it's like Solomon's baby problem, right? Like, what do you want to do when you don't want to raise the baby the same way, and someone has to go do something else.
Okay. Well, I guess anyway, both of you did wonderful things over the years. And in the next 10 years, what we will see around in terms of IT and computer infrastructures, what is mostly our, at least my personal concern, what will be around? What will be like the IT infrastructures in 10 years?
I'm of the opinion that infrastructure never really goes away, right? If you get into a lot of these older organizations, they're running things that they're decades old, right? At least the core paradigm, the core infrastructure. So I think you want to think about it in layers, and there might be some transitions, but there's still lots of things in this world that run on mainframes. There's lots of these things, so I don't see in many ways anything going away. I do think that there's a lot of interesting investment and excitement around kind of new kinds of computing, right? So inference focused infrastructure, the obvious NVIDIA stock price reflecting the training of these models. There's on the horizon, maybe like far horizon, some world where quantum computing starts to become more of a thing that we have to deal with, and all that's going to require massive amounts of physical infrastructure that needs to be managed and coordinated to make all the possibilities true. So I think nothing ever goes away, right? So whatever, there's going to be someone running some puppets somewhere in 50 years, more likely.
And if you, let's say, I mean, you have kids, no? I don't know how old they are, but one day they will be ready to go to work, and maybe they will start to do a career in the IT sector. What things, maybe in the operations or development sides, what are the things that they should learn if they start now, people starting now in the IT of today?
Well, this is something that's been on my mind a bit as my oldest has just started college, and my middle child is applying. So my youngest is a couple of years away from that. But if you're looking at the landscape of so I'm long on computers and tech, and that there'll be work that needs to be done, but it's unclear exactly what dynamics you're going to see for that work in the short term, especially because right now you're seeing all these videos from kids that are just graduating with CS degrees from great programs that claim they can't find a job, right? So it's hard for me to say, oh, like, you should go learn this one thing because these kids that are going to the best, MIT, Stanford, Berkeley, or whatever, are struggling to find work in tech right now. So like short term, there might be a bit of a crunch, but I would say right now we're at an inflection point with the AI stuff. And my advice for anyone in any domain right now would be keep your finger on the pulse of AI and the intersection of the AI with your interests, right? So my wife's a medical doctor, and she has lots of it's kind of busy work that either she or a scribe have to do to take notes and charts and that kind of stuff, and it's necessary, but they're starting to be like an AI scribe or so like there's going to be all of these little verticalized solutions to all these problems. And if you understand a domain and a little bit about how to make the AIs be useful in that domain, I think you're going to be in a pretty good place.
Yeah, indeed. I think that being able to interact in a good way with the AI is one of the, let's say, key skills which everybody should have. Well, in Italy we have English.
Let's go back a little bit to the other question about
AI
in the data center, right? So I don't think the AIs are going to be running the data center, like not tomorrow. But I do think that the people who do run the AI, that run the data center, will be using a lot of AI.
Of course, they're already using it all the time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Indeed.
So that's the domain you want to focus on. Like, think about how AI can help you do whatever task you do.
And you personally, where AI has been more useful for your own activities?
I mean, like I said, I just have lots of little things I play with. So like I use AI, I use ChatGPT to calculate stuff for my restaurant's payroll. Like, it made some like data entry kind of tasks, like go from taking an hour to taking like 5 minutes, right? So there's that. Then anything to do with like code, the cycle time for being able to kind of take an idea and do an experiment with it is getting shorter and shorter. the domains that you can press into, even if you have just a little bit of knowledge about, you can use the AI as a tutor, right? You could say like, oh, hey, here's this thing. What's the idea? And it usually knows quite a bit about that code or that domain. I played with using AI ChatGPT as a language tutor to study foreign languages. It's surprisingly good at languages. As a, like some of the stuff we're trying to do to make a book, like you can use it to get scaffolding for essentially for any domain or anything to do with something, especially text-based stuff, right? So code or copy, you should never ever have to stare at a blank page again. So it doesn't mean it's going to solve all the problems for you, but you can immediately be editing your ideas instead of trying to like build up to that thing. You can go from 0 to whatever 100 kilometers an hour, whatever the right speed is for your freeways, right? So it's like you should never be staring at a blank page. You should get right to work. Like whatever idea you have, like you could just make it happen. And I mean, we're pretty close to. I probably need to do this to like make it true, but I have all these ideas in my head for a long time for little startups, right? And it's like each one of them in the old paradigm to do that would be, and these are like little consumer things or like, productivity things, little apps. And each one is like, oh, you probably need like 4 or 5 people and like $1 million or so to like get that prototype. And now it's getting to where, oh, if I just spent like 10 hours a week and I use, Cursor and Replit or whatever, like the toys, the cool tools, then I probably would have a pretty good prototype of this within a couple months, right? And so it's like the dynamics of the time and resources that you need to express an idea are just going to zero.
Indeed. And at the same time, my personal concern is that in some way I don't value as much as, I mean, for example, a text, a poetry or a book written by or co-written by an AI for me is somehow less valued than an original book or handmade book by humans in some way. And that's strange in some way, but it's like cheating. Maybe writing, letting write most of the, I mean, for art. I mean, not for technical stuff necessarily.
So I have this argument with my oldest son actually right now, and he's like artsy and he wants to make art, and he's like, oh, it's cheating. Well, it's like no one cares, right? So you can die on that hill if you want to, but if it looks the way that people appreciate and it reads or sounds the way people appreciate, then they're going to appreciate it. And yeah, it's going to commodify things in a way that changes some of the dynamics. So maybe because it's easier, it's less valuable, right? Maybe it changes some of these other dynamics. Okay, fine. But I'll make you a wager, and I have the same wager with my son. It's like someone in the next, I'll say 3 to 5 years, is going to make something that looks on the level of what you've seen come out of Disney's Marvel Studios, and make all these characters and have this crazy story and turn that into $1 billion enterprise, and they're going to do that in their bedroom with these tools, and it might as well be you, or you might as well try to do that. If you have stories to tell and you have ideas about how this stuff should work, whether you tell it with stick figures or you tell it with the AI images, it's still the good story, right? And I think that's what's key for me is, does it resonate with me as a human being, right? Because if you don't get other human beings to respond to it, then it's not going to be valuable. So, you could take the purest view that art is for the artist, and that's fine. But like you mix in a little bit of capitalism and you can eat a lot better.
And if the story has been written by an AI itself, so even the idea behind.
I mean, I would kind of go back to my earlier statement that you can't turn your back on these things. So you're already seeing this. I saw this like a year and a half, 2 years ago, these publications that used to take short stories just like stopped. They're like getting inundated with garbage coming out of the AI. So
Yeah.
almost to like add to your point, if you've lowered the cost and time that it takes to generate all of this noise, then the things that come out that rise above that noise are going to stand out even more. This is my hypothesis, right? So if it takes me 10 years to write a book, and it's like 2 times better than someone who wrote the same book in a year with an AI helper, is that winning? Is that successful? I'm going to say like you should write 10 books. Like the person who wrote the 10 books will be better. And I mean that's the Stephen King model, right? Like if you just write a lot of books, you're going to get better at writing. If you're writing a lot of books with AI, you're going to get better at using the AIs. And the outcome is not the output. So the output is guaranteed, but the outcome is not. And whether you're talking about writing code for your infrastructure, writing code for your customer AI or UI, or writing a novel or making a movie, like it's the same dynamic. If it's not the right thing, it's not the right thing. It might be close, but it's not the right thing, right? So that's the danger of the AI, is it's really good at getting really close. And so the difference, I think that what I'm wagering will make the biggest difference is the people that have the insight and the care to take it to that next level and make it better. And I don't think the AIs are going to do that, and they're especially not going to do that if you force feed them synthetic data where they're just basically swallowing their own vomit all day.
All the time. Another of my concerns in this field, which I mean, I don't know if you feel like the same, but it's like the discussions we had when the internet was booming. You know, everybody talking about the internet. Now everybody's talking about AI, and more or less we are always talking about the same things, or the same doubts and remarks we may have about these things. And honestly, I'm not sure about anything here, so I don't have any real answer or real opinion. But your point about the idea and the possibility, which is becoming a reality, that basically whatever you're going to see on a screen can be true in terms of happening in the real world, can be generated by an AI or not. And so where is the truth? What is really natural, so to say, what has been made by machines, both in terms of texts, but also audios and videos especially. So we are going to live in a world where basically our perception of the world is via monitor, a screen, no? Except our, let's say, reality where we work and we live in, all the rest of the perception of what we have about our world is via a screen. And what happens on the screen can be anything. And now more and more convincing.
I feel like even before the LLM explosion in the last, we'll say 2-3 years, we were already pretty much in a post-truth society. And now we're at a point where you can't trust video evidence, right? Like there was an arms race for a while where it's like you could make stuff, but you could usually, the artifacts that would be created by the process of trying to make it would be detected pretty easily. And I'm not sure we're 100% past all the artifacts, but you can make some pretty compelling deep fakes now with very, very little investment. So you can't trust video evidence at this point for all intents and purposes. So I don't think we ever get that back, right? Like we're in a post-truth reality, and we have to do, and maybe that will make the value of truth and authenticity and the humanness even greater, or maybe it won't. But the dynamics that we've seen with the internet, I actually want to make a quick aside and then come back to this point. So there's this massive investment in AI, And I'll go on record and predict that I think you're probably going to see, just like the internet, kind of like a .com style crash of the AI before it gets back to all the exciting possibilities that we've already been talking about. I just think that's inevitable with the level of expectations that have been set for some of these projects, which is again, like, that's the cycle of life too. And maybe some people would think this is cynical, but I think that's just like how this works. That's the natural progression of some of this. But then for us trying to navigate reality and truth, like, you can't trust anything anymore. Maybe you never could, honestly, in our lives. And so then you try to find the little power circle that you can have, where you can try to make, the authentic truth for yourself and your loved ones. And then, like, whatever's outside of that, you don't have control over, and you maybe try to expand that and bring more people into the circle. But you can't. I learned a long time ago, and in some ways the hard way, that I don't get to control the universe. So I'm not going to try to fight that battle.
It's not in our. Okay, yeah, I agree. It's definitely, and after all, we already filter all the time the world with our senses. So in some way, we never really perceive the truth, but our own perception of the truth. I was thinking, a lot of bubbles will probably explode in the AI, but who will win and survive will be huge, as now the internet giants become. So who is going to win the AI wars or competition will be really...
I mean, right now, if I was betting, it seems like the same people, right? So the Googles, the Microsofts, and the Amazons are in a thing. OpenAI has a interesting trajectory, but that's effectively Microsoft at this point too, or not, depending on the day of the week. But I think that the paradigm is shifting. The winners and losers aren't necessarily 100% clear, with the exception of the tool chain, right? So if you look at the TSMC, like, this is like deep infrastructure, right? So how do you even fabricate the silicon is definitely going to be that there's still a lot of innovation in that level, right? Like, you're going to go to the two nanometer fab soon. So
who makes chips will definitely survive this era. Okay, well, I have some questions from the AI, but they are back to the ergonautic side. I don't know if we should go back to these topics. But let me... it's interesting, because actually I just asked one of all those, but actually they are quite interesting. And
throw it out there. We'll trust the AI.
Let's trust the AI. In your experience, what are some key characteristics of a successful learning organization? I should use an AI to talk, because my accent is terrible, as you probably know. But anyway, I don't know if you asked this. So, key characteristics of a successful learning organization. What are some practical strategies that companies can implement to foster a culture of continuous learning and improvement?
I mean, I think you used a bad word, the F word. The forced is that's probably not the best way. I've seen a lot of things that people try to do, and in particular, I think that there's a tendency, especially in these kind of like enterprise cultures, to declare victory when you didn't really change anything or accomplish much, right? So there's a lot of political capital that needs to be exchanged, and so people won't admit that they failed. So that is a key. If you go into any of this literature about organizational learning, is that you need a way to recognize actual failure, because they can improve if you don't do that, and you need to be able to change your behavior. And I think that's the key for a lot of why these DevOps initiatives, transformation initiatives struggle is they get some new ideas, they get some new vocabulary into an organization, but there's so much calcified process. There's so much calcified power dynamics in the headcount and the budgets that it's very difficult for anyone to change their actual behavior. So they start to change the words. They'll change their titles to DevOps, and then they'll change the titles to SRE, and then they'll change the titles to platform engineering. But there's not very much change. So to me, the key to learning, and I think this is true if you're an individual organization, is the extent that new information results in new behaviors. So I think this is something people do all the time too. You read all the books, you got the language, you read Lean Startup or whatever, and you talk about pivoting, but you didn't really change your behavior. Just have like your idea and you're going for it and you're going to do that thing, but there's new information and you didn't change your behavior. So that's the balance you got to find. You want to believe your convictions, and sometimes you have to do the same thing over and over. That's another funny quote where people say, usually they attribute it to Einstein, that if insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. And the reality is that's also the definition of practice. Practice is doing the same thing over and over, expecting better results.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so a typical question I ask, this is personal. Who I should invite to this podcast? Some people you think is worth having a discussion with?
There's a lot of great people. Where do you want to stay in these kind of like infrastructure-y type of conversations?
Well, not necessarily. We can go around if you have some suggestions.
I mean, there's the usual suspects, all the like DevOpsy people. I think it'd be fun to get people. I like getting academics on podcasts. They're usually happy to come on. So some of the research on kind of like burnout or organizational learning, like industrial engineering, like there's a bunch of safety factor people that are interesting. Maybe that'd be good. There's some people, some of them are ex-Pivotal, doing this thing called Grok, which is new hardware. Some of them might be interesting. And they are in like basically configuring a bunch of kind of totally new hardware for data centers. They rewrote some things and have borrowed a bunch of ideas about some of this from all of these communities. That might be interesting. I could make some introductions to a couple of those people. It might be fun. I don't know who you had on either. So, the usual suspects, like you could go through the DevOps people, get John Willis. There's some of the platform engineering people that are like, I don't necessarily think that there's tons of novelty, but I think that there is some forward progress with some of the language and like just getting people to think about platforms. I've been talking about platforms since 2014. I kind of gave, this is actually a topic that I wanted to play with today, that I was thinking about a little bit, because there's like all this discussion about developer productivity and developer experience. And I don't know exactly your politics or how it is where you live, but I think a lot of it sounds very similar to me about how people argue about public transportation. And like no one wants to take public transportation in the US, right? It's like, well, also like that's why everything else is bad, right? Like all this traffic, all this other stuff, like there's lots of things. Or another similar one is helmet laws. It's like people don't want to wear helmets on the motorcycles. It's like, well, okay, but then you're dead. Like, okay. Don't wear helmets.
Yeah, but
anyway, like that, I can make a list. I think from the hip, I can give you names if you want, but I don't want to necessarily put people on the spot either. But I can give you some names and contacts if you want to go through a bunch of.
Yeah, you can also spend the names if you want. Yeah,
I mean, the people that you probably know, like I don't know, Chris Bayard, James James Shubin, like all these people they're still like playing with infrastructure-y stuff all the time. That's interesting. If you want new blood, like I can put you on to the Grok people or get you some of the academics I think might be fun. Another topic that is in my head about DevOps that you should get to, like John Allspaw. But this have you ever seen the Cook talk about the bones, the osteoclast, osteoblast?
No.
So this is one of my favorite talks. I probably watch it like every year for the last couple of years, and every time I feel like I got a little more insight. But it's sort of related to organizational dynamics. But he makes the argument that the most archetypical model for resilience is a bone, and how a bone is constantly being built up and torn down. So he goes through these signaling mechanisms about how the signals change about what's dominant, either building up or tearing down when you put force on a bone or when you break a bone, and then he kind of like makes these metaphors for organizational dynamics. And the reason I think this is interesting, and it's related to some of the work that I was explaining that we try to do, is in most organizations, they always build up, but they never really tear down. And it's also related to the comment about why infrastructure never goes away. Because, and you see this in org charts right now, you have organizations that they have a DevOps team, an SRE team, and a platform engineering team, and they're all reporting to different people, and they're all different budgets, and they're all different headcount. And then maybe there's also like a microservices thing or like a CI/CD thing that's different. And what you really want to be able to do is resorb and break things down and build them up based on the new forces that are being put onto the organization. Where what evolved in most cases, and there's a lot of reasons why this is happening with the way that the rewards and the funding models happen, but we never really resorb our organizational resources. We just keep adding layers and layers with each buzzword.
Yeah, indeed. So, Andrew, I would say thank you for this very nice discussion. It has been a pleasure to listen to you and talk with you all the time. I don't know when we will meet again, who knows, but all the best for your future.
Well, I think you'll see some of our friends in Ghent. You're going to probably go to Ghent, right?
Definitely.
So I'm not going to make it this year, but say hi to them. And I'm not hard to find on the internet. The easiest thing is like reach out on LinkedIn or Twitter or Blue Sky more and more. I'm happy that you invited me to come ramble. My exploration of my own thoughts are always fun to go through, but I would love to see this podcast be a successful thing with a bunch of interesting conversations, and I'll try to help you do that. I'll make my list for you.
Thank you. I mean, for me, it's already having the opportunity to listen and to talk with people like you is a pleasure. So,
absolutely.
Thank you.
And yeah, I enjoyed a few of the episodes. I haven't watched all of them yet, but I definitely saw the ones with Adam and Luke. So,
thanks. Bye, Andrew. See you sometime, somehow.
Stay safe. Till next time.
Abnormal DevOps iterations.